had it. I had to stop moving it and find it the perfect spot.
Welcome. It takes a village in order for us to make systemic change. So I am so excited because today we have a wonderful guest with us, Cheryl Poe from Virginia. And Cheryl is the founder and owner of Advocating for Kids Incorporated, which is a nonprofit special education advocacy organization. Cheryl has a master's degree in urban education and counseling. She's also completed over 15 hours of postgraduate study in psychology. She has been the chair for the National Association for the Education of African American Children with Learning Disabilities. She also served on the board for the Council of Attorneys and Advocates, COPA, which I'm also a member of. And that's where she has helped develop strategies and goals to address the needs of minorities within that organization. And then maybe some of the most exciting news, I think, is that in March of 2017, Cheryl was elected to be the president of the board for a national special education nonprofit called National Allies for Parents in Special Education. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And Cheryl's going to tell you about an upcoming conference they have. But I want to welcome Cheryl to our broadcast. And Cheryl, I am just so excited for you to be able to talk about this systemic complaint that you recently filed in the state of Virginia. So, and there might be some information that, is still more confidential. So, please don't, feel like you have to reveal more than what is appropriate. But if you could give us some background on the systemic state complaint that you just filed.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited to be here. So I'd like to start with the systemic complaint was an interesting, what I call almost the perfect storm, the way that it came about. I had been working with a family for over a year, which included filing and representing them in a due process hearing. In the state of Virginia, advocates are allowed to represent families in due process case hearings. So it was myself along with Mr. Alameen out of Richmond, who was an advocate, along with Lois Manis, who was an attorney on the case. The parent had a prevailing win or decision out of her due process case. However, Virginia Beach City Public Schools refused time and time again to implement the actual services that were ordered by the hearing officer from the win of the due process case. They were aware that the attorney that the parent worked with was unable to pursue a federal case against them to get them to implement it. And they kind of took advantage of the fact that the parent just could not afford to force their hand through a federal case. I then had an interaction with another family who had a separate and different representation and attorney who won another due process case against the city of Virginia Beach. And this was a military family. And again, Virginia Beach refused to implement the prevailing decision for the family. So what had happened was we all got together. We started a process where I wanted to hear what some of the concerns parents were having in the city of Virginia Beach as it relates to special education. And to give you some background about this particular school district, it is the fourth largest school district in the state of Virginia. It has the resources that a lot of the surrounding school districts do not have. So they have a well-staffed related service department to really help students get the services that they need. It's not the things that a lot of my parents ask for aren't costing them additional fees. It's things that they have within the district. And once these group of parents got together, one of the things that was identified were that, we're a huge military area here, and that it really was impacting what they called fleet readiness as it relates to the military families. And we were able to get our representatives, Congressman Taylor, he had a representative that met with us. Tim Kaine provided a representative to meet with us. And oh my gosh, who was the other? Oh, Senator Warner. They all had representatives that said, you know what, these are some concerns we really want to hear more about. So we met with them, and it was myself, a group of about 10 parents, some military representatives, and parents just shared their stories of denial of basic services, especially when you transfer over if you're a military family. A lot of parents had some IEPs that had some really good things in there. Virginia Beach would automatically just say, no, those are not services that we will provide, and provided far less services. We have situations where a lot of our young kids, our preschoolers, our kindergartners that are on the spectrum, instead of doing functional behavioral assessments, developing behavioral intervention plans, or even developing good behavioral goals, Virginia Beach's policy is call the parent, have the parent pick the child up from school. I've had 2 families where members literally lost their jobs because they were getting called almost every day to leave work to come pick up their child. And we're talking, again, little guys, 5 and 6-year-olds. So we did not have faith that our Virginia Department of Education would do much. So the representatives, after they met with us and they heard our stories and our concerns, and they asked us, why didn't we go to the VDOE first? The concern was all of us have had involvement with the Virginia Department of Education, and not a lot of relief was granted. In fact, we were blown off. Parents had examples of where they tried to file state complaints that met the requirements from what I could tell, but instead they were getting these notices of inquiry instead and saying, no, we're not going to open a complaint. So the representatives met with Dr. Trent, who at the time was the Secretary of Education for the state of Virginia. She claimed that she had no idea any of these issues existed within the state, which we all know is just not true. I actually had participated in a meeting with her in Richmond, where a group of parents and advocates and activists in Richmond told her these were concerns that they were having. But, we followed the rules, and her recommendation, I guess she gave a directive to the VDOE to meet with us along with the other representatives that I had mentioned before. So they did. To our surprise, we had the Assistant Superintendent, John Eisenberg, who's in charge of special education, along with Pat Hines, who's the Director of Dispute and Resolution for Sped Ed. There was a federal monitoring person there. I always forget his name. I have to look that up. I'll let you know about that later. And then we had Hank Millward, who was the Director of Family Engagement for the VDOE, come to Virginia Beach and again met with about 30 parents, if not more. And we were fortunate enough to have some media coverage on that particular meeting. And the parents, I was just so proud of them. They really did a good job in using their 3 minutes to give concise, on target, on point statements about what their experiences have been with special education services in the city of Virginia Beach. We also provided the VDOE with a list of solutions and outcomes that we had that were the goals of the outcomes of all the advocacy that everyone was doing. VDOE took the information. They went back a month later. They reached out to the families and to us, and they met with us again and came back down. And they were forthcoming. They did send out a memo of a memorandum, a superintendent memorandum, to all of the districts regarding the district's responsibilities for implementing due process decisions when the parent prevails when the LEA is not following in federal court to challenge the decision. So that was very helpful. In one aspect, that was only under IDEA. They continue to note in the state of Virginia that our Department of Education has absolutely no jurisdiction over Section 504, so they won't touch any issues that we have with the lack of oversight for those particular clients. But within that, the VDOE pretty much, we said we will submit a systemic complaint on all of the issues. So that gave the Virginia Department of Education an invitation kind of to come into our school district to look at the allegations that our group of parents made. But hopefully they will see that as a systemic complaint, that they will look at the other issues from parents that weren't named. That's a really big problem in Charmaine. I'm sure you run into this. Retaliation against parents that verbally assert allegations against the school district. So we had quite a few parents that were interested initially in the complaint, but when they realized that they would have to be named, that they kind of backed out because they were scared to death that the principals at the school and the special education department staff would actually come after them and their children, and they just did not want to take that risk. So we are in the process now. We're getting a lot of information from other parents that are interested in having their case looked at. I sent an email to Mr. Eisenberg and to Mrs. Hines to find out how they're going to make sure that these other parents who are scared to death of being retaliated against the school district, how that their voices can be heard and that their children's complaints issues can be looked at also. So we're, it's still a work in progress. We just did the first step, and I get feedback, all kinds of feedback about this, like, oh wow, this is so great that you did it. And then I get other feedback of, you probably just wasted your time because the Department of Ed isn't going to do anything. And for those who say we wasted our time, I disagree. I think anytime you can get a group of 35 parents to come together and share their stories in a way that is concise, in a way that shares the struggles that they have to go through as a parent of a child with a disability, I think that is a wonderful, I think right there, that is a healing process for parents to know that you're not alone and you have people that are listening. And I think that the VDOE was listening. And I'm hopeful, I'm hopeful that they're going to really come down here. They're going to do a good job. They're going to meet with these parents. They're going to hear the parents' concerns, and that they're going to provide compensatory educational services for these kids. I have this one little guy that's named in the complaint, breaks my heart, still working on the case. The school just one day said, we decided because of his behaviors, instead of doing an FBA, Mom, we're going to reduce his schedule so he can only come to school a half day. All the other kids that are in the program get to come a whole day, but him, no, he's only allowed to be here for 4 hours. And he deserves those hours back. He really does. The biggest lesson for me as an advocate that I learned through this is letting go of power and allowing the parents, once you get them together and you provide the guidance for them, really allowing them to take some ownership in this process, because I always believe that a child's best advocate is their parent. And if they have the skills and they know how to do it correctly, that it'll be a smoother ride. It won't be easy, but it'll be smoother because it's never an easy ride.
Yeah, but it's worth it. It's worth it, right? Yes, and we have several people watching us live, so I wanted to. Hi, everyone. Susan is saying that she sees the same situation in Iowa when parents file complaints there, and it is a universal situation. It's not just limited to one state. We all see this, right? So hopefully. Through more systemic changes or complaints, we'll see those systemic changes, right? Melinda is here and she's loving what you're saying. Sorry about several people that are here from a variety of states. And if people want to, they can simply click on the share button. And I was going to look here. And you can share this to your own Facebook page, or you can share it to groups that you're in. So go ahead, and while we're talking here, you can share the video. So that's great. And if you're watching in the replay, you want to still participate. We still want your comments and questions. So type those in, and both Cheryl and I can come back and respond to those.
Mm-hmm.
Susan had a question about when was the last time IDEA was reauthorized. She said that she heard that they started to do it in 2010, but it was not finished. Yeah. 2004 is the last big reauthorization. There have been some additional regulations that have come out since 2004. And there's, different opinions about if this is the right political climate to bring IDEA back to the table, because parents may lose more than what they have, which sometimes seems to be very slight.
Exactly.
But, I want to go back to one of the things that you had just talked about. Was the first step was bringing parents together.
Yes.
And, I think parents so many times feel like I'm the only one that's feeling this way, or my child's the only one that's getting discriminated against in this situation. But so do you have tips for parents about how they can find other parents and get a group together?
Yes. The way that it worked for us, and probably would work also in your area with Charmaine, is my clients that I work with as individually, that I provide representation for, that I'm advocating with, or that I'm working with. One of the things that I always ask them, especially when the case is done or completed, is I ask that, or would you be willing to help out another parent that may go to your same school or is having some of the similar situations, just as a referral, not only for my services, but also to connect them with people that I know, because I've been through this with this family for a year. So I know this story represents what this new parent is going through. And I feel that when, and a lot of my parents say yes to that, and so I connect them. I share with them each other's emails. I also say things like, this person has been through what you have been through. Are you willing to talk to them? So I've had some of my clients that I've worked with in the past call up another client and say, one of my other clients, I've been there, my child went to the school, just general little tips. And I think that's how this one kind of merged, because it's kind of funny. Two of my clients had the same therapist. So they were in the therapist's office waiting for a session, and they were complaining. I think one of them was talking to me on the phone. The other one overheard it, and they just started talking to each other. And they were like, oh my gosh, yes, she's always telling us to get together. So the key is giving them a room for me to meet other people through my own business. I think also going to your local autism society groups, going to, if you have a CHAD chapter in your area, I think even checking in with your neurodevelopmental pediatrician or your therapist and say to them, I need some support. Do you have room here to start a support group for us, or with other parents that are going through what I'm going through? Unfortunately, we have to be creative. Of course, Facebook is one of the best tools to reach out to other people. There's tons of groups out there. I just caution people, be careful what you put on the internet, because it's probably going to be there forever. One of the biggest piece, I see that there's a lot of stuff about retaliation here. Do you want me to address that real quick?
Yeah, and then we'll go to a question that Rhonda has. But yeah, retaliation, I think, as you talked about, is a real live fear, right?
It is. So let's talk about that. Retaliation pretty much has already happened to you. If you are a parent of a child with a disability and you are advocating for things that you know you have a right to under your state regulations or your federal regulations, example, you have a right for your child to be evaluated for a functional behavioral assessment and for the school to determine to develop a behavioral intervention plan before they call you up every day and tell you to pick your child up to take them home from school. Them doing that to me is retaliating already against you. So I think the retaliation, you've already lived through it. It's now, how do you document it to protect yourself, right? So in a situation I had with one of my parents that was in the systemic complaint, very interesting. After it was released, we had an IEP meeting. Special education coordinator had been coming to the meeting. All of a sudden, we get an email the night before that the director of special ed was coming instead. Real simple, easy thing to handle. You don't have to get upset about it. You don't get flustered. You just send in an email. Wow, thank you for letting us know 24 hours before the meeting that the director of SPED is coming. I note that when we were having trouble all last year and you refused to do a functional behavioral assessment and instead called me every day to pick up my child, the director, you were not interested in coming to my meetings to provide me support. I note now that I'm part of a systemic complaint where I'm protected from retaliation, that now you're coming to my IEP meeting. So what you do is you document it in a way, and instead of getting flustered about it and staying in the angry mode, use that energy to clearly document how the action is different from what it used to be based on an action you took. Document that very clearly, send that off to the school. They're going to know you're tracking them. They're going to know that you put that in a way of, they know what she's talking about. She's building a case of retaliation. When you continue to build your record on those things that happen like that, then you just send it off to the OCR. And even if the OCR doesn't take it, the idea that you have the evidence, you're submitting it, the school gets notified about it, more than likely some behaviors are going to change. In that situation, just to let you know, the reason why we found out when we got there, the reason why the director was there is because the coordinator that pretty much messed up the case, she retired. So it was kind of a good thing, but still you want to protect your client at all costs, right? You know, you protect them, you put it in writing, you document, this is a new behavior, you've never done this before. Where were you when you kicked my baby out of school? Oh, okay, we got a new coordinator. I mean, well, the coordinator left, which was a good thing in my opinion. But for retaliation, if you think about it, it's already happened to you. Now the key is to get smart and use that to your advantage to protect yourself and your child as you move forward. That's my advice.
And I think that's excellent advice as far as showing what happened, what was the district's response, you know, when you were just going through IEP meetings, right. And now you have this event when you filed a complaint, and look at the difference that the district is you know, showing right now. Exactly. So yeah, that documentation, as we all know, is like critical. Exactly. I did want to get to a question that Rhonda has. Rhonda's in Colorado, and she says, how do you handle those families who just do not have the skill set or capability to actively participate, but do have the desire to make it happen?
I work with a lot of families. One of our missions, the missions of advocating for kids, and also along with NAPSI, are working with families that are not your traditional families that have the resources, skill sets, even education, vocabulary, money, time to really advocate effectively. So I'm very patient with them. I spend a lot of I talk the language that I'm a parent myself, even though I've been doing this forever. I have a master's degree and all that good stuff. I'm still a parent of a child with a disability, and I'm still Black no matter what. So for us, I mean, that's a big thing, making sure that minorities have access to this kind of information. So I always start off with being authentic with the family. making sure whatever skill set weakness they have, identifying it, and then let them know that is okay. Let's figure out how we can work around that skill set. What do I need to do to help you understand that better? Right. So a parent like will say to me, like or parents that get really nervous or have some of their own maybe anxiety issues, or I am very good at taking it step by step and being very logical. Use examples that are real life to them in their life setting. So if you don't have the skill set to read the regulations and understand and interpret it, what they mean, and then how to apply that in a meeting, you break it down to this. Your baby deserves to be in school. Yes. Your baby has a diagnosis of autism. Yes. He has an IP. Yes. What do you know your baby responds well to around issues that are getting in trouble? Well, I know when I'm firm with him that he listens to me. And I notice that his teacher, her voice is a little high, and, he just ignores her. Okay, great. So we go back to the team and we share that. So I may have to do what I call interpreting for the parent, what it is that I know that they are saying that's relevant on the issue, but they don't have the language skills or understand the jargon to display that. And I, in a heartbeat, in an IEP meeting, if any member of the team uses language that I know my parent can understand, I'll stop and I will turn to the parent. I said, did that make sense to you? Did you understand that? And then they'll like shake their head no, because I want to give them permission to say, no, I don't understand that. And then I make the LEA, you need to restate that. You need to state that in a way that they can understand it and engage. And I check in with them through it. And even I'll model it sometimes. Sometimes I'll say, especially with some of the OT sensory pieces, I always forget the different areas of where a person may have a sensory need. And I'll raise my hand. I say, I don't understand what that means. Can you please break that down for me? So I'll even model for my actual client or parent to be vulnerable to the 15 people sitting across the table. It's not your job as a parent to know everything that they know, but it is their job to make sure that what they know is said to you in a way that you can make informed decisions.
And I think that's the nice thing that happens when parents can bring a friend with them to be that emotional support, if they can bring an advocate with them that has more knowledge about the law and what their parent rights are. Because when you sit at that table alone,
Right.
It is very intimidating. And so as much as we can, I think some things are like just having the procedural safeguard rights in a language that the parent uses as their primary language.
Exactly.
Having an interpreter there if they do speak, a different language. Some of those things parents don't understand that they have the right to ask for. And that can make a huge difference. Right. But yeah, that education for all of us is an ongoing process.
It is.
And it's something that we have to be cognizant about. Like, we get so used to speaking in the special ed jargon and acronyms.
So glad you said that. I'm not the only one. Thank you.
Wait a minute here. Not everybody understands it. So it is helpful for us to take that step back and give permission for parents to ask those questions at the meeting.
And what else helps too, I don't know if you do this, Charmaine, is I take these sticky notes. So even if I have a parent that's a little bit anxious and doesn't want to say anything at all, I will say, are you okay? Do you need a break? And sometimes they'll say yes. So they may feel more comfortable with me saying, hey, can we get a break? Take them in the hallway, explain to them, let them tell me through their way what it is that they want to say, and then I come back. I mean, I do whatever I can do to accommodate families, cases that I can take on. I just wish I could take on more. There's such a need here. I can't hit everybody that wants to help. That feeling.
So Melinda has a question. She said, do you think parents getting together and making systemic complaints can minimize the retaliation versus just a single complaint?
Yes. I do. I really do. That theory, and Pete Wright, I think, and you can help me with this, Charmaine, didn't he do that scenario. One parent, you're a fruitcake. Two parents, you're a fruitcake with nuts. I think you have to get to 5 in order to be heard. I think there's strength in numbers. I think that the same philosophies that apply in other work that people do about getting numbers involved, getting more people willing to give voice to a concern, the greater chances that everyone will listen, and a better chance, a decreased chance of a level of retaliation. But also, Melinda, to a degree, I think that you have more protections around it, because now you have this tangible thing that says, I am verbally saying, you all hurt my child, you all denied my child FAPE. And if they take actions, and along with a group of other parents, and if the district takes action against all 9 parents, then you have a systemic OCR complaint. So I do think it's strength in numbers. I really, really do.
Yeah, and I think, you're right. When we look at typical community organizing strategies around other issues, those can be applied to advocacy. The other thing that I have found is, if you can find allies of parents that don't have kids with disabilities, then you're not looked at as, oh, you're just this special interest group. But you do see that this is a district concern. And chances are, if your child with a disability is not being treated fairly, is not getting the education they deserve, chances are there's other kids without IEPs that are also being discriminated against. So the more you can find allies with other parents or community members, the stronger your group is going to be.
That is so well said, Charmaine. I mean, you are so right. And it is the idea of using all the other strategies that have already been tried and true.
Right.
To our work. Yes.
And Amanda is in Virginia, and she says, what do you feel the division's response to better, or which would get the students what they need in a more timely manner? State complaints or OCR complaints?
Well, hi, Amanda. I know Amanda. Amanda's out of Chesapeake, which is a city not far. It's in the Tidewater area of one of the areas that I provide services for. And I will say, I'm going to answer it twice. I'm going to answer it specifically to her area. In Chesapeake, one of the interesting pieces when it comes to state complaints is they hire a multi-million-dollar law firm called Reed Smith to respond to their complaints, which I find amazing. They're, I think, the only school district I know in the area that I filed complaints that use a multi-million-dollar law firm to actually respond to a state complaint, and they make it very legal, and they make it very hard for a parent. So in her city, because they use that law firm for state complaints, I think it's extremely hard for a parent to get any relief on a state complaint from that city. I highly believe that a systemic complaint is way more effective for the individuals that are named in the complaint, because they have protection in a group, right? They're not alone. Then you also have the VDOE, who is going to come and do a site visit. The Virginia Department of Education does not come to do a site visit for one complaint. I mean, they just don't. It's a paper look. They look at it they look at some paperwork, the LEA submits some paperwork, and they make a decision. With the systemic complaint, they're actually coming in, they're going to be putting their hands on the charts or the paperwork that the school district has on that student. I believe it's a more comprehensive complaint. And I also believe that more children get helped. A single complaint helps that one student that you're working with. And I think for the building the village thing that we talked about, this is kind of how it started. I'm helping one student at a time through the advocacy pieces, but when you look at it as a whole and you pull them all together like we did, you have a village of people whose children were denied a free and appropriate education, and they are working together to not only get relief for their own children, but to every child in that division. So it may take longer. That's okay, because the outcome, I believe, will be greater. if nothing else, I believe my parents are going to feel, the ones that filed are going to feel good about the fact that they get to talk to someone about what happened to their child. So I kind of went off on a tangent, but I hope I answered. Did I answer the question pretty good, Charmaine?
Oh, I
You
think
throw
so.
anything there?
And yeah, and it's funny because Amanda used to live in Colorado, and I
Oh,
advocate in
oh
Colorado.
my gosh.
So it's like, so it's, we're all connected. We're all
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. Yes. I met her at ISEA.
cool.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is it really helps to have knowledge about, like Cheryl was saying, in that local district, this is how it's happened.
Yes.
And because I know I did a complaint earlier this year with a family in Idaho, and it was just a one-person complaint, and the state in Idaho pretty much always does on-site
Oh,
investigation.
really? Wow.
So it's kind of nice to have that.
Yeah.
One of the resources I was going to share, and I'm hearing this echo. I don't know
Yeah.
if
Is it me or you?
if you can turn down your sound. I don't know what it is. It's always weird. But I was going to see if I can pull up the website for the Advocacy Institute, because they have some wonderful resources about state complaints. So let me see. If I can.
Candace's website, the
Yes.
Institute. Okay, yes,
Yeah.
the Advocacy Institute. Yes, that is a gold mine for advocates and parents. There's so many different styles of complaints that are there. You have the styles that the attorneys use, which is very legal in the way they write it. You have parent complaints when they write, and parents have filed complaints. And I think I talked to her. I think she put up our complaint too, our media copy, so it's there if people want to see the kinds of things that we ask for. I always, even when we file due process, and you probably do the same thing, Charmaine. I always ask for more than I know I'm going to get, in hopes that I get it. I just like to give them an out. It's like, okay, yeah, you won on that one, but the part that was important, the kid can go back to school, or you're going to do an FBA. We won on that. So, well, I always put parent training in there, yes. Because. And then I also request that the parent have access to the training. You want to know why? Because moving forward, if the issue comes up again, the parent can say, wait a minute, I know you all were trained on this because this was part of my complaint. So.
Right. And, what I've noticed too, and I have this very sick notebook here, because this is the last state complaint I did for a family in Colorado. And so one of the things to know is that you can only file state complaints for something that's happened in the past year. Correct. So if there's unresolved issues from years ago, that can't go in your state complaint. But what was nice about this is we were able to settle before we actually filed. Yes. And I think it's because they knew we were very organized. They knew we had documentation to back up our, complaint issues. And then it was all of a sudden at the end of the year, it's like, let's talk, right. So yes. Sometimes all that time and organization that goes into getting ready to file a state complaint can actually be very beneficial, and you can reach a settlement. The other thing that I think is important to know is what are some previous complaints that have happened in your state, and can you find out what those decisions were?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I think there's only about 12 states that if you go to their State Department of Ed website, will list decisions. Like Colorado was one. So this was a complaint in Colorado. So one of the things I did was look for compensatory ed decisions, because that's one of the things we were asking. And almost every complaint decision that I read the recommendation was the parent and the school district go back and have a discussion about compensatory ed. It's like, what? I mean, we never know to begin with. How's that going to help us? So in that case, it was like, I felt like our settlement was going to be better, because we went to the complaint and all you got was go back and discuss comp ed. I mean, there's no guarantee you're going to get anything. So you know, there are these nuances about how to file complaints, how to do things. So people like Cheryl that have an enormous experience in that are really helpful. I'll also post some links in the post description later of some other websites, like we mentioned, the Advocacy Institute. There's also Cadre in Eugene, Oregon, that has a lot of good information for families explaining the state complaint process. And so there are resources out there that you can also tap into. And
at 1 year.
Yay.
Oh, hey, Candace. Hi. She's here. Yes, she did this wonderful presentation, I think in Baltimore, her and Marcy, for COPA, where they first kicked this off. And ever since, it's had a really good following of I know I've used it to check out some complaints, and yeah, it's a good resource.
Yeah, I first met Candace, I think, at a peak parent conference in Denver, and I like became this, you know, follower. The Advocacy Institute, their website has great webinars that you can listen to. They have tremendous resources, not only about state complaints, but about following the IDEA money. There's a lot of there's resource in there. So let's go to Patricia's comment here. She says, hello, we have noticed a disturbing trend from not only the schools, but also the district leaders to use delay and stall tactics as a way to wear down parents who advocate for their students. While parents wait in hopes and good faith for improvement and promised supports, time and educational opportunities slip away for our kiddos. How do we effectively combat this?
Document. So if I were to break that down into a real life situation, is when a parent is saying, I have documentation from the neuropediatrician along with the psychiatrist that's prescribing the meds that my child is on the spectrum or has ADHD. However, and you keep suspending him for impulsive behaviors based on that, but you refuse to evaluate him under child find. And you get, let's try, I have another case, one of the cases that are in our systemic complaints. That's one of my biggest pet peeves is child find. And I'm just using that because I like concrete examples for people. So the wear down is this. Let's just wait. Let's try a student support first. Let's just, the teacher promises that she'll do this. Let's monitor this. The whole time your child is losing instructional time. I mean, your child, the more that they delay, it is more of a harm to the child because the child isn't getting the support that they need to access the curriculum. So the way I combat that is I write down in a letter, you do your letter to stranger. I've been asking since, I don't know, however long it's been, for my child to be evaluated or for my child to be considered for assistive technology devices or OT services or whatever the service is. These are the reasons why I'm asking, and you make them very concrete. He has a diagnosis of this from this person. The characteristics of that diagnosis are this. It is impeding him in school because his teacher sends me emails every day. I even had a teacher, one of my cases, horrendous. They didn't want to evaluate the child. The teacher took a video on her phone of the baby. He was a small one, 6-year-old, and just kind of watched him have a tantrum and tear the room up. And then just sent it to the mom and saying, oh, this is what I have to put up with. I'm like, what about having an IEP meeting and doing a functional behavioral assessment on the child? So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to digress. But my answer to you to combat that is you document what the disability is, what the services that you are requesting, how that service will support the child accessing the general ed curriculum. My child needs assistive technology because he's reading on the 3rd grade level in the 5th grade, and at least in Spanish and science, history and science, he needs assistive technology to read to him because he's smart enough. He can do the work. He just doesn't know the vocabulary. If that's an example of something that I see a lot of delay on. So the idea is document the need and then document the delay and how the delay means your son or your daughter is losing ground on accessing the curriculum because they are not moving forward with the services that you are requesting.
And I think,
document.
Yeah, for sure. That big D word, right? Document.
Big D word. Yes.
I think the other thing that sometimes parents aren't aware of is in IEP meetings, when you're making specific requests and the district is denying that, you need to ask for prior written notice.
Yeah.
So many times parents are told no, and it's like, okay, I don't know. They're the expert. I guess. And it's like, don't accept no. I often tell parents, what you accept continues. So we have to stop accepting that. We have to, hold them accountable. And when they deny requests that you've made in a formal IEP meeting, ask for that prior written notice. And, there's, certain things that have to be in the notice, but you need to be able to have the district say, this is what the parent requested, this is what we considered, this is the documentation, and this is why we made this decision. And that, again, becomes part of your documentation.
And Charmaine, let me just follow up. Some of our districts are a little sophisticated. Like I said, the one that Amanda's in Chesapeake, I had a case where I filed a state complaint on the prior written notice, where in an IEP meeting, they reduced 400 minutes of the child's IEP services. The prior written notice did not in any way tell us why that decision was made, what data they used, refused to give us the information that they collected for the progress reports, and the IEP was only 4 months old. And one of the roadblocks what I learned from that case was, even when you get that prior written notice, if it does not address, right, they'll do that, not address the request that the parent made, then I highly recommend that's where the documentation comes back. Thank you, I received my prior written notice on this date. However, I note that it failed to address A, B, C, D. So yes, the prior written notice, they have to do it. And again, when they don't do it right, you really need to read through it and then yourself document on it. That discussion was not addressed here. I still need to understand why you removed $400 of my child services.
I know. And Susan is with us, and she said, we had great results from a state complaint, but it was individual, even though 5 students left the school over lack of access to general ed. I'd love for all of us to band together to change the system so we don't have to fight one by one.
Yep. It takes a village. Right. I agree with her. And I think this kind of collaboration that Charmaine and I are doing is a prime example of how we as advocates in the community can help parents like her. This, we too share our resources. They don't know. I mean, we share resources through another format. And I think that what she says is correct. And we have to band together. We have to start trusting each other a little bit more because we're all in this boat together. And I feel that things are getting a little bit more harder for us as special education parents than it has been in the past.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to say was when we're talking about banding together, Cheryl has shared this release information that she has for when she does systemic complaints and getting the group of parents to release. So if you want a copy of her release of information, just type the word release in the comments, and my IEP bot should get that out over to you automatically. But
nice.
Again, I think we'll come back, and I want to put together some resources for parents, like we talked about for the Advocacy Institute, for Cadre, and some of the other resources. So be looking for that. I'll make a post about that so you can have some other materials or websites that you can go to. And also, I want to talk about your conference before we end today.
Yes.
I'm excited about what you're going to be offering in October.
Yeah, I'm really excited and also anxious and nervous because it's new. Anything new can cause some anxiety provoking. It is called the National allies of for parents in special education. We go by NAPSI, and there we are not competitors with COPA. That is the other large group of, which is a national nonprofit that does special education work. Our focus is totally different. Our focus is really to ensure that underserved communities and advocates and attorneys that work with that population have some of the resources to better serve that community. We are of the position that that particular demographic has a different need as it relates to having access to resources and how resources are presented to them. We also believe that advocates and attorneys that work with that particular group need more information and support on how to reach out to that underserved population, how to do grassroots efforts, we will be discussing all of your major topics, child find and things such as that, but we're gonna also throw a spin in it and say like, well, what does that look like for an underserved population? So what does child find look like when you are in an urban or rural setting? It's very different. I've had parents call me, and IEP team said, oh, we've been told we're not allowed to evaluate Black children right now because we don't want to have our numbers up too high and we do RTI. So no, we want to make sure that the advocates that are working with that population, they're aware you're going to hear some crazy stuff in this, and these are some of the things that you need to do to combat that. And in your rural areas too, they have some very unique challenges also. Just a lack of resources. I mean, just not being able to have 2 or 3 speech pathologists out there. And what are your options then? What can you do to ensure? I was in Roanoke, did a case in Roanoke, and I had a speech pathologist pretty much say on record, on tape, in front of a group, we don't provide speech as a related service to anybody in the whole district. And that's just, I mean, that was a systemic OCR complaint we did, right? That's been 2 years. 2 years, I have not heard back from them. Oh, that's why I don't like to use OCR too much. But again, I think that came back to the idea that they're very rural. They only have maybe 3 or 4 speech pathologists, so they limit their services, and they thought that it was okay, and it's not. So NAPSI is a fresh look at advocacy with the lens of helping those that are most often overlooked. And we're just real excited about our conference. It's going to be October 5th, 6th, and 7th in Charlotte. And Charmaine, I can send you the link. I don't know how to do this now, but if you can share it with your viewers, that'd be great. And it's our first one, so.
Yeah, I was going to share it here, but my computer is being real glitchy and it's like shutting down when I try to share. So
okay.
I'll come back to the post, but we're near the top of the hour, but I wanted to get to another question. And Melinda has said, so we were in a crazy due process, as you know, for one of your clients. Can you tell us how the state complaint will help these parents without having to go through that process?
Well, it really depends on the facts and the allegations of the case. We actually have one of the claims in my systemic complaint is about a due process procedural violation that the district actually violated through a due process. I think that a due process, a state complaint is not the way to go if you're looking for private placement or even really good compensatory educational services. Kind of like Charmaine already spoke to, she filed the complaint. The Department of Ed was like, yeah, there's some compensatory services needed, but they direct you back to the IEP team, who are the same people that failed the child in the first place. So you really have to look at the facts of the case, the temperament of your VDOE, and the parent's emotional ability and desire to go through a due process to make that decision. I have a case right now in Suffolk I'm working on where I will be filing filing probably a series of state complaints, and then we'll file a due process on it, because that just makes your due process stronger. So instead of, I think your question, framing it from a different perspective, how does following state complaints before you go to due process help your due process case? And the answer to that question is, as long as it's a good, solid complaint and you get a ruling in your favor, that really helps your due process complaint through the processes of resolution, because you already have proof that something was violated. So
yeah, so I think that's really helpful. And those are the things, and it's the strategies that you really want to think about ahead of time, because you want to have a series of what you're going to do if you don't get resolution at this stage. What are you going to do next? Right. And you want to make sure whatever you do at the beginning isn't going to sabotage
what you're doing later.
Next steps
Good
is.
point.
That's where
that's true with the media too. That's very, we need to be aware of that with the media. You know, you want to make sure I'm of the notion of, before you contact the media, you want to have your ducks in a row. You want to have a solid complaint. You want to have it being accepted. You don't have to have the outcome you want, but you want to at least know that it was valid enough that the state picked it up before you share it with the media. So just be aware of that too.
Well, Cheryl, I want to thank you so much, because you carved out a great amount of your time today and just had so many nuggets of great information. And I so appreciate you being a part of this national movement, and that, you know, we look especially at empowering parents that traditionally are more marginalized in their families. And what we can do to make a difference there. And to know that when we band together, when we build that village and enlarge that village, that we create greater change for every child in our country. So thank you so much, Cheryl. I will also go back in the post, and I'll put your website, Advocating for Kids, because I want people to be able to know how to get in touch with you. And you also have a Facebook page, Advocating for Kids. So if people want to join your Facebook group, that would be a great way for them to stay connected with you too.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and asking some great questions.
Talk to everybody later. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.